Hey guys, so today I'm gonna show you how to mount the new bracket or tower for 1290 Super Adventure. First of all, we need to make some space for the mounting. We will be removing the windscreen, the front mask, and depending whether you are using also the dashboard relocation kit, we will be also removing the dashboard. When we are at it, I will also show you how to fish out the auxiliary power outlets, because obviously you are getting the Super Adventure bracket to mount your GPS, so those outlets will definitely get handy. Alright, so this is the assortment of parts you are getting with the Super Adventure Tower. At the top you have two sets of bolts to mount the windscreen support together with the main support, the leg. And you've got two sets. I will be explaining that later in the video. The top part, those are hexagonal flange head bolts with nuts, also flange nuts. They are making for a very nice installation, but unfortunately the flange nuts do not have nylon inserts, so they might come loose. You will need to use Loctite. For that purpose, you are getting also another set of screws together with washers and nuts with nylon inserts to not to be forced to use the Loctite. For the time being, we are providing both. I would really appreciate your feedback, which set works for you. I personally really like the hexagonal head bolts with a flange. It looks really nice. The stainless steel looks really nice on the black surface. And but if it's not working for you guys, it was working for me. But you know, I'm just a test rider. There will be a bunch of you using that in the field, so let us know if you are really using the other bolts. Then we would not be burdening you with useless hardware. You've got two sets of washers that go with the Allen socket bolts and the nuts with nylon inserts. The smaller ones, they go underneath the head of the bolt, and the larger ones, they go underneath the nut. The reason why we're not just providing the nuts together with the nicer hexagonal flange head bolts is that these buggers are unfortunately not produced in 14mm length, and in order to use the nylon washers you need 14mm. These other bolts are 14mm, so that's why you got two sets. Then you have the large spacers that you will see how they are used in the video later. Two large diameter washers which go on top, and again a nut with flange that go on top, and two more 12mm hexagonal head with flange, which is used to mount the main support on the bike. They go all the way down here. So that's the mounting hardware. Oh, and the GPS bracket, which is mounted right at the very top of the tower. You can use it in two positions, either when my hand represents the front of the bike, either in this position or the other one, depending how far forward or backwards you need to move it. And that depends what device you are using and which windscreen, because each windscreen is also providing different space between the windscreen support and the windscreen. And this is the assortment of bolts, bushers and nuts you are getting with the dashboard relocation kit. The M4 10mm bolts. The smaller washers go underneath the head of the bolt. Then there are nuts with nylon inserts, and underneath those go the larger 4mm washers. Then you've got hexagonal flange head bolts. Those are used to mount the kit to the bike, to the same holes where the dashboard was originally mounted. Then there are M5 nuts with nylon inserts with washers. Those are used to mount the dashboard on the relocation kit with using the original black KTM screw that you removed when you were unmounting the dashboard. And you've got again hexagonal flange head 16mm bolt that is used to fix the relocation kit to the Super Adventure Tower, and with those go these two sets of nuts, the flange head nuts, I mean flange nuts. They are for the nicer installation. If you want to be on the safe side, this installation requires you to use some thread locking agent because they might come loose. In order to preserve the paint, they do not have grooves. They're polished on the inside, so they might not hold in place very well. That's why we are providing, at least for now, two sets of nuts. You're getting also M5s with nylon inserts. In order to remove the windscreen and the mask, you will need Torx number 30. And I've already loosened up everything because you don't really need to see all that screwing out. It's a good idea to remove or loosen up the bottom screws first, and then hold the screen and just remove the windscreen. Now we put it away so that we don't scratch that. And now we need to remove two bolts, one on each side. I hope you can see it on the video. There's down there, I already removed it. There was a screw. That one is also for Torx number 30. So we remove this one. There's another one down there on the other side. In order to remove that, you will need an extension for the Torx, something like I have, with a ratchet in the end. The ratchet is really a useful tool for what you are going to do today. So since my bolts have been already removed, we can take away the mask, and now we have some working space. Next thing, we will be removing the plastic windscreen supports. To do that, you will need Torx number 20 to remove these bolts down here, one on each side again. So these are for Torx 20. Yeah, there you go. And now we need to loosen up two 10mm nuts on each side, the ones that hold the windscreen relocation mechanism in place. In order to do that, you need to get preferably two 10mm wrenches, or a 10mm socket and a wrench, because the best way to do that is to remove or loosen up at least both of them at the same time. It makes it makes the loosening up easier. Otherwise, when you try to move one, the other one is spinning around. It's moving your windscreen support up and down. So it's better to do both at the same time. So I again already did that. They're very loose so that I can remove them with my hand. So there's one. You can remove the whole thing. And the other one, the other side, yeah, might be a bit trickier because there are springs. There's the right side on your video, the left hand side from the rider view is spring loaded, and that's the one that's taking care of the locking mechanism staying in one position. So I've removed the nut, the rest somehow falls out by itself. Now I'll just take away the windscreen support and whatever else is underneath. So you have there this little rim, washer and a nut, and there's one more part which might be a little tricky to pull out. You might need a pair of tweezers or something to fish it out. I'm gonna tweezers work, so you just take it with your tweezers, and this is the last bit that we are removing. Yeah, and from the other side you take out the support, again this ring and a washer. Oops. So now it's ready for the installation. On one side, basically the only thing that remains on the bike is the brass, or what it is, this brass rod which we are going to use to mount the tower, and everything else is gone. Now if you are removing also the if you are installing also the dashboard relocation kit, you need to also remove two bolts on each side. It's again Torx 30 in order to remove the dashboard. There's one. There's another one. And this is the perfect occasion to fish out also the auxiliary power outlets. To remove them, you will need 8mm socket, and it's done like so. On one side I've already removed that, but this hole here, there used to be a nut. To remove that you will need, as I said, 8mm socket, and to do that, from the left side you lift the lever, the positioning lever, to loosen up the connection, unscrew the nut on the other side, and take out the whole lever. Make sure you don't lose anything, you will need that. And then you just gently lift the dashboard. It's already loosened up. And now the best way to do that is to remove the whole dashboard, because there's really not a whole lot of space. When you are removing it, on my bike it's no longer there, but here there used to be a lock so that the connector holds in place. I managed to break it. Be careful when you are removing it. It holds also without the lock, but you never know. Of course it's better if it's not broken. So let's put it there. And here, when you look inside, I've already done that. When you look inside, then if you're lucky, you already see these connectors with some PVC sleeves to protect them from short circuiting. I've already connected my cable. If you're lucky, you can lift them with tweezers or or maybe make a little hook with a hard wire and try to lift them. I managed to do that. It was a bit tricky. The manual tells you to remove the whole headlight to get to the auxiliary power outlet. I didn't feel like doing it. You might end up doing that. Depends how deep these little buggers are. As I was mentioning, I was lucky. I fished them out with tweezer. Just make sure that when you're plugging something, you get the polarity right. So let's assume that you've connected cable for your GPS, and now we just put the dashboard half back just to attach the positioning mechanism with the lever. Okay, so now that we've cleaned up the working space, we will first install the dashboard relocation kit. If you don't have one, just skip to the timestamp that's marked on in the subtitles. And the relocation kit, it composes of 4 pieces, 4 main parts and some mounting hardware, 2 of the black things and 2 of the smaller stainless steel ones. Before you put them on the bike, they will be positioned like so. Before you put them on the bike, it's better to pre-assemble. The installation is simpler. With the dashboard relocation kit, you're getting 2 types of washers. They are all 4mm washers, but there's one bigger and one smaller. I hope you can see it on the video. The small one goes underneath the bolt head. The bigger one goes underneath the nut. So let's do the first one. Oh, a washer. And the other one. At this stage, you don't really need to torque anything properly. Just screw it with your fingers so that it holds together. We will be putting some torque once it is mounted on the bike. Right, so we pre-assembled one half of the relocation kit. To put it on the bike, we will not be using the screw that held the dashboard in that place, but we'll be using one of the provided hex head bolts. So let's put it in there. Right now you can just use your fingers. As I was mentioning, we will be putting some torque into that later on once it's all pre-assembled. Yeah, sometimes when the bike is leaned on the side, I'm having trouble catching the thread. Great. And now we will fix the dashboard to the stainless steel parts. And for that, we will use the original bolts for the dashboard and a 5mm nut. Okay, so for that we are going to use these provided M5 nuts with nylon insert and a washer. So Okay, that's one side. Alright, so that's the other side. Now we will torque a little the dashboard. Again, that's the number 30 Torx. Just a little bit, we will go through all the bolts in the end with really proper torque. Now it's really just to hold the whole thing together. Right. And now we will mount the tower itself. So first you will need these big pieces. That's the inner leg, which is giving it the stiffness. That's the main supporting element. And for that we will need two main things. One of the 12mm hexagonal head bolts, which go down there. Now we will need one of these aluminum nuts, big ones. That's basically a spacer that's going to make up for the space for the components that we removed from the stock installation. And we will need one of these black large spacers, large diameter washer, and an M6 flange nut. Make sure that the machine spacer is positioned with a flat surface facing up. It doesn't have a regular shape because we need the space to be able to move the windscreen up and down, and this flat area is making it possible to mount the windshield to the lowest possible position. Okay, again, just tighten it a little bit with hand. For now it is okay. Now we will move to the other side, and we will do exactly the same. Put the leg on the stock brass rod, or what material it is. It is supposed to be pretty tight. You can see that it doesn't slide out by itself, which is completely fine. We wanted to avoid as much slack as possible. So when this happens, just give it a little tap. It's going to go inside, and if it doesn't, then just take your tool and just give it a tap. It's going to slide in. So what you saw now, it's intentional, it's really on purpose. So don't complain that it's not machined properly. It is supposed to be very tight because we don't want any slack here. So let's put the other spacer, and a knot. Good. So those are the support legs, and now we will install the windscreen supports. Okay, so now we are going to install the windscreen support. It can go in 3 different positions: the highest, middle, and lowest. You should always choose such height to cover your GPS with the windscreen. This is a powerful bike. It can go over 200 kilometers per hour. If you hit rain at such speed, it's really like a jet water. The chances are that even if the device is water resistant or waterproof, those speeds with rain, the water can go through because the pressure of the water is really enormous at that speed. The position for the ideal position for CI pad is the middle one. if you are using the R screen, when you're using an aftermarket larger screen, it doesn't really matter where you put it. The same should be applicable also with the larger S screen, the larger screen for the S models. So the height adjustment, however, is not the only thing that can be adjusted here, and I will show you that just now. As you can see here, there are two sets of holes. It lets you also position the windscreen in a more upward position or more streamlined position. The streamlined one, it's practically the original stock angle of the windscreen, and it's not working for the GPS device also well, because especially the small R screen is very streamlined and there's really not much space to put anything behind it, even if it was a small cell phone. So because of that, we made these two sets of holes, which will let you create more space for larger devices like the iPad or maybe Garmin 276 CX, and those are the ones we are going to be using now. Make sure that if you are in the top two positions, the middle one or the highest one, you use always 3 bolts to make sure that everything holds properly. Now we are going to put the nuts from the other side. Okay, done. Again, just by hand, we will be putting torque later, and we can move to the other side. I'm going to show you again what are the adjustment possibilities. So again, you have three options all the way down. Actually, it's good to somehow use this hole as an orientation guide, because all those holes on one side of the main leg, they are all in one row, so it's actually very easy to get oriented according to this particular hole. So this is the lowest possible, middle one, and highest possible. We used the middle one on the other side, so obviously we need to use the same here. And this is going to be more tricky because I cannot just put all the bolts in there. The bike is leaned on the side stand, so I will need to put the nut on each bolt, otherwise it's going to fall out. Alright, so the other side is done, and maybe I should have mentioned one thing real quickly. When you are putting the support to the lowest possible position, which is one step down, you are using only 2 screws. You are using only these 2. So 3 screws or 3 bolts when it's in the middle, or highest when it's in the lowest, you're using only these. So this is just something I will need to mention again, so that you don't get confused. When you're putting it to the lowest possible, 1 screw will be left over, which is completely fine. Yeah. Okay, so now it's the time to install the GPS bracket. And if you have the dashboard relocation kit, just press the legs together a little so that it slides between the main leg and the dashboard support. It's supposed to be tight, so it's okay that you need to press it together a little. And I will be showing you how to install the holder for iPad, and for that the best position is the second hole from the front, with those round edges facing to the front. If you are using a different device, you might have to experiment a little what works best depending on your setup. There are plenty of adjustment possibilities, so I'm pretty sure that you will find one that will be suitable for your device. I will just sketch the upper bolts first, and if you have the dashboard relocation kit, you were also provided hexagonal head 16mm bolts. They're longer than all the other ones because we have more material here to put together. So we will use these 16mm, and first make sure that the holes are somehow aligned. Yeah. Nice. And I'm still using the nicer nuts with the flange. Make sure you're using Loctite, or at least check the joints now and then, because they have no nylon inserts. They might come loose because of the vibrations on the bike. So check or use Loctite. I'm not using Loctite because I will be taking the thing down in a bit, so I'm myself not putting the Loctite, but you should. Or thread locking agent, doesn't need to be really Loctite, could be anything. I was showing you before in the video that I was using some small brand, Bison or whatever was the name. They work about the same. Just make sure that you are using the mild one, not the high-tech one, because the high-tech might be very difficult to undo later, which you might want to do eventually. Now this is the whole thing put together. We will be putting some torque into the joints. For that we will be using 8mm socket. Where is it? Sorry, 8mm socket and an 8mm wrench. And maybe one piece of advice, I'm using wrench that has actually a ratchet in it. When you want to preserve the paint, it's always better, probably you prefer to preserve the one on the outside for the case that you would be ever repositioning the windscreen. It's a good idea that you try to preserve the paint, because otherwise you can see the marks. You will anyway see them. There's no avoiding it. Once the bolts will be screwed, you will always see them. It's not a piece of jewelry, it's a bike, it's an adventure bike, so you will most likely take it to rough places. It's not going to look like this for long, probably. But anyway, I do it the way that I hold the outside in place, and I'm putting torque from the other side, so that the nut is sliding around the paint, but the front bolt is not moving. That somehow makes sure that the paint is preserved as much as possible. But of course you can do it also the other way. It doesn't really matter if you don't care how the paint is going to look like. Okay, now don't forget to torque the ones that go down here. Here you should be already careful, because there are metal thread inserts, but it's plastic all around. So be gentle. You only need as much torque to prevent the thing from moving, not more. Eventually, after you ride it for the first time, just recheck and retorque as required, but really don't put too much. Just to stop it from moving. Also use thread locking agent like Loctite to keep the bolt in place. Do not try to keep bolts in place by over torquing them. That's not a good idea generally. Now we will need to Retorgue. Oh yeah, also the dashboard relocation kit. Same story like with the bottom bolts. I was just talking about. Don't put too much torque in there. About as much as it had before you when you were removing them. I can then remeasure and give some Newton meters in the end in a spreadsheet. My guess it's about, I don't know, 8 Newton meters, 7 maybe. I'll measure later. Now regarding the main support bolts, before you start torquing, it is a good idea to make sure that they are level, that they are in the same spot. The good position is when the rod is sticking out just a little bit, half a millimeter, maybe a millimeter. That will make sure that the rod is somehow in the center. There's some locking mechanism holding it in place inside. You don't want to damage that, so really make sure that they that it is not sticking out too much on one side or the other. Like so is actually good. Okay. Again, somehow flush, sticking out just a little bit. And to torque these main nuts, we will need 8mm socket and 8mm wrench. Just like when we were undoing them at the beginning, it's also a good idea to torque them at the same time. Otherwise it spins. It tends to spin around inside the stock tower. Here also be careful about the torque you put in there, because all this is plastic. You don't want to squash that. When one of them, also make sure that when you are putting torque in there, these thick spacers are not turning around. Maybe just hold it with your finger. And I think that this could somehow be enough. Yes, I wouldn't be putting too much pressure right now, too much torque right now. I think that's maybe just 2 Newton meters, really not significantly more than when you are screwing a cap on your air valve on your tires, right? This doesn't really need to be too tight, just so that it stays in place. Again, once you ride for the first time, you ride a few dozen kilometers, this whole thing might sit in a little bit. Recheck, torque as required, do not over torque. And we have a few more to put some torque in. Alright, so I think this should be just about it. Ah, no, it's not yet it. We still have some more to torque down here. And for that, we're going to need 8mm and Torx. Where did I put it? So again, Torx number 30 and 8mm. Okay, and now those. Okay, so these 4mm ones, for that we will need a 7mm wrench and an Allen key. I don't have one, I lost it from my toolbox, so I'm using Torx, small Torx, will work. You don't really need to put too much torque in that. These nuts, they have the nylon inserts, so they will hold in place very well. So the only purpose of this is to stop it from moving. It really doesn't need to be over torqued. Right, so it's all torqued, everything is, I think I didn't forget anything, so I suppose this is done. I've already recorded a video how you put back the front mask and the windscreen. Unfortunately, I recorded it before I torqued all those bolts, and before I put the this GPS bracket here. Sorry, I'm gonna cut it and paste it after this, so don't worry about seeing a windscreen being placed there without the bracket. I'm pretty sure that you will get the idea anyway. And now we will install the windscreen. I will be putting there the stock R screen, and then later I will also show you how the other options that I have here fit. There will be also the stock screen for S models and large PUI screen. Before you're installing the windscreen, you should put there the mask, because otherwise it will be tough. This piece will not go underneath the windscreen. It will be difficult or impossible to install. So let's put the mask in place first. We will use the bolts that we've taken out from the bike before. The black KTM ones. Make sure they don't fall inside your bike. They will be pretty difficult to find on the market. You would probably have to buy them from the dealer. Again, you should be using some extension for the tool, because it's pretty deep down and otherwise it would be really difficult to reach. That's one side. And the other one. Right, so that's done. We're using the number 30 Torx for that. Now let's check if it fits. Yeah, looks that this one has been really done to the specs. Everything fits perfectly to the last millimeter, as it should be. This is hand manufactured, so obviously it could happen that the tools slip a bit if there's some misalignment here. Just don't hesitate to move the support a little bit side to side to find the hole properly, but this one should actually work really well. And I sincerely believe that if not all, then most of them should be like that.